if you look back on the first album you released 3 years ago, your first solo album, I mean, Alive, and compare it to this one. Um, have you listened to Alive recently?
Not for a while. You know, I definitely think that there are some songs on Alive that pointed toward where I was headed with this record, but then again, this record, when I started working with Jamie, it was such a different production style. You know, obviously the time period in my life is different, experiences are different, everything. When we started to make this record, I just said, I looked at him and said, this is a whole other level for me. You know, this sonically, you know, what I'm writing, everything, you know, Jamie and I seem to have met at a time in his career and a time in mine where it was meant to be, you know, and we went to a whole other level. And then, you know, to have Peter Buck on the album and to have Rachel Yamagata sing on the album, those were like, you know, we had already made this cake, and then this really awesome, you know, icing got to go on it. And when I finished mixing it in Miami and mastering it in New York, I was just blown away. I was just like, this is just my, you know, it's a very fine moment.
Does it for you solo-wise? Can you say that this album more defines you as a solo artist than maybe the first
Very much so. Well, yeah. I mean, also it was produced a lot differently. The style, sort of under the hood aspect. You know, Alive was more tracked, much faster. You know, more band style with my original band, which I'm still playing with all those guys too. This one was more like we took a song and we had a virtual sort of track of just me performing it. And then Jamie would go in, and the first thing he did was he would pull out my sort of singer-songwriter guitar part. So that was gone. So that didn't point toward the rhythm where it was going to go, didn't do anything. It just went away. And then he would start to build a track around it. Like, I think it should do this here, I think it should do this here. And I'd never worked like that because, you know, being in a band, there's always, you know, drums do this, bass does this, you know, and there's roles defined. Whereas with Jamie in this record, with me, we had none of that. There was no limitation. So we stripped the guitar and then built the rhythm first and crafted it in a way that every time I heard what he did, I was just, couldn't believe it. I was just surprised.
Can you pick one song then that, well, you had written in a certain rhythm and a certain style that turned out completely different, even rhythm-wise?
You know, rhythm-wise, Seven, even though the way I play it in concert acoustically sounds, you know, a lot like what it is. I mean, it's hard to get away from it that much because you have the basic rhythm and tempo of the vocal and cadence and all that. But I remember playing Seven on acoustic. We took the guitar away. I think I went out on a dinner or something, came back, and Jamie had the dun dee doo dee dee, and I'm going, this isn't Seven. Like where's what's going on, you know? And it had this, like, it was almost like this massive attack song or something to start. I was like, what's coming? And then the way that he merged that electronic sound with elements of my acoustic, but not what I played, and then the way that it emerged into the chorus, I was just like, that. I mean, he had really blown my mind at that point. That's when I realized I was in a whole other level with production, you know, because I'd never sounded like that. And then it has all these elements of me in it. I mean, of course, you know, the dynamic I'm known for, you know, all the emotion, all the intensity, but it's got this musical bed that is really extraordinary, and in my career. So I couldn't be more excited.
Last question. The album ends with the song Cornerstone. It's also some sort of really sort of outro.
Yeah. It's Cornerstone is a Bob Marley song.
It's just, okay.
Yeah. If you hear Cornerstone, it's the stone that the builder refused. It's really folky. There's he did it in a bunch of different ways. He did sort of a calypso kind of version. Then there's acoustic versions but it's very different. But I was just connected to the lyric right away. I saw the Marley, the latest biopic that they did, the movie, feature-length movie that they did, Chris Blackwell produced. I saw it about a year ago, and was just, I mean, I'd known a lot about Bob throughout the years. I've read a lot of books, and and had followed had looked at his life from all these angles and movies and whatnot. But I'd never seen a movie done. I don't know if any artist has ever had a movie like that. I mean, it's just incredible, and I was so impressed. There was this one moment where, you know, Bob is talking about Cornerstone and his whole family history and how that all went down, and it just touched me. And so I said to Jamie, I said, I want to cover this song called Cornerstone. And I sent him like a YouTube clip or something. So let's figure out how we want to do it. And the first version he came up with, I have to tell the story because it was like, it kind of sounded like UB40, and I said, dude, we can't do the white guy reggae with this one. It's got to be totally different. Not that they're bad, I like them, and so it was really funny because we laughed, and he said, okay, well, how about we really straighten it out and make this more hymnal, hymn type of vibe from it. And he started playing the piano part, and I said, this is what I want to do. And then we stacked this really great vocal part, and I love the way that I sing on it because it really shows how expressive my range has become, I think, over the years. Like I start really low and then I can get really big at the end and go to all these different places on my vocal spectrum in that song. And it just felt like that should end the record.
Last question. You don't want to talk about too specifically about your song, but what is Cornerstone for you about them?
You know, I think what touched me about the lyric is this idea that, you know, the way that we perceive reality. Some things seem to have value that in the end don't, you know. And that sounds really general, but, you know, I think it's also a biblical, you know, comes from the Bible, but it's such a universal idea. I mean, to me, like I had this idea for a video where you would, you know, because I work with World Vision, we do charitable work and get kids hooked up with, you know, sponsors to help them out and all over the world, mostly in Africa. And I thought about a video. I still would like to do it because there's always this, you know, when you see pictures of the children suffering, you think if that person can go to school, if that person can get off the grid that they're on in a new one, that could be the president of that country. That could be somebody that society, for whatever reason, the world is like, you know, ignoring them. They're disposable. They're not important. But how many times does it happen where that's the treasure, and we just couldn't? It wasn't seen, you know. And when it's cultivated and supported and nurtured, then you hear these stories where you get this successful person who started out like that.
Yeah.
You know. So to me, it's just about seeing through the way that we value things, like saying, okay, that has relative value, the way that we perceive it here, but it ultimately does. You know, it ultimately, in time reveals a whole other value system of what's sort of behind the scenes, and that's, you know, that's why it's always important to never judge that by its cover and to look deeper. And I think that's why I like the song so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.